Hey there, and welcome to Code Academy. My name is Galina, and I'm a developer from New York. Today, we'll be covering the Personal Library Freeform project, part of the Learn Java course. Now, before we get started, let's take a look at some of the concepts we'll be working with today. To complete this project, you'll need to be familiar with the hash map data structure, the for each loop, and object-oriented programming concepts, including classes, objects, methods, and inheritance. We'll also be working with the following built-in Java methods: size, put, get, and keyset. We'll use the size method to determine the number of key value pairs, then the put method to add a key and an associated value to our hash map. Then we'll utilize the get method to retrieve the value associated with a certain key, and finally the keyset method to return a list of keys within our hash map object. Great, now let's pull up our project and get started. In this project, we'll create a simple library tool to help analyze completed books in a small personal library. The tool will print out the books that a user has fully read. We will store the books and their completion status in a hash map. Upon completion, feel free to explore and add additional functionality to the library. Let's jump right into step 1. Java provides built-in classes, but that does not mean they are readily available in all Java programs. Some classes are stored in Java packages. The correct Java package has to be imported into a Java program before a certain class can be used. The HashMap class is part of a Java package. On line 1, import the correct package by typing the following line. So let's navigate to our code editor and add this line on line 1. Perfect. Now that we've imported our HashMap class, let's hit save, move on to step 2. Next, we want to create a class called library. So on the following line in our code editor, let's create a public class library, followed by a pair of curly braces. Let's check off step 2 and on to step 3. Now we want to create a library constructor. You can leave the contents of the constructor empty. So within the curly braces that we just generated, we're going to create our constructor. Perfect. Now we're done with step 3. Let's move on to step 4. Let's create a method that will print all of a user's completed books. Create a method called getFinishedBooks. It should not return any value. So after our constructor, still in our class, let's create our getFinishedBooks method. Public void, because our method will not be returning any value. Get finished books, a pair of parentheses, and curly braces. Now let's check out step 4 and move on to step 5. The getFinishedBooks method should accept a hash map parameter that holds strings and Boolean values. Name this parameter library. And here we have a hint as to how we could write this parameter. So our parameter goes inside of these parentheses. So we have a hash map that holds string keys and Boolean values. And the name of our parameter is library. Now we've completed step 5, and let's move on to step 6. The first thing the method should do is check to see that the hash map it's analyzing is not empty. Create an if statement that checks if the size of library is less than 1. So after our opening curly brace, for our method, we're going to generate an if statement that checks if the size of library, so we're going to use this size method here, is less than 1. Now our if statement is going to have separate curly braces, and let's generate those. And let's check off step 6, and we're ready for step 7. Inside of this if block, print out a friendly error message to the user indicating that the hash map is empty. So we're going to use our system.out.println built-in Java function that will print to the user the hash map is empty. Otherwise, in step 8, in an else block, we want to print out all finished books. First, we want to create a for each loop that iterates through each book in the key set of library. So after our closing curly brace on line 11 for our if statement, we're going to generate the else. In our else block, we want to first create a for each loop that iterates through each book in the key set of library. To do that, we're going to use the for keyword along with each book that we are iterating through in the key set of library. So the book is a string in the key set of library. Great, now that we've set up our for each loop, let's take a look at what is going to go inside of the block. In step 9, inside of the for each block, we want to check the completion status of each book. To do that, let's create an if statement that checks to see if the value associated with each book in library is equal to true. So in our code editor on line 14, let's add an if statement that checks to see if the value associated with each book. So to retrieve a value from our hash map, we're going to use the get method. So it's if library.get book. So we're checking for if the value of each book is true. Awesome. Now in step 10, inside of the if statement, we want to print out the book. This completes the get finished books method. So inside of our if statement, let's use system.out.println to print the book. Great, now let's check off step 10 and move on to step 11. Let's test out the functionality we just built. First, create a main method. So still inside of our class, but outside of our getFinishedBooks method, that would be right here. Let's create our main method. Public static void main string arguments and a pair of curly braces. Now that we've created our main method, let's create a hash map object that stores strings and Boolean values. Call the hash map object myBooks. So on line 24, let's create our hash map object that holds string and Boolean values. And we're naming it myBooks. This is a new hash map. Let's check off step 12. In 13, we want to add the following books and their completion status. Road down the funnel, true. Rat, a biology, false. Time in, true. 3D footprinting, false. So here are the names of our books, and they are going to be the keys in our hash map. And true, false are the Boolean values, are their associated Boolean values. And for this, we'll be using the put method. So on the next line, let's add road down the funnel, true. MyBooks.put road down the funnel, comma, true. Perfect. Now we want to do the same thing for the others. At a biology, false. Time in, which is true. And finally, 3D food printing. That's false. Great, now we're done with step 13. Let's move on to 14. Now create a library object called myLibrary. To do that, we'll use library, myLibrary equals new library. Great, now we're done with step 14. Let's move on to 15. On the next line, call the getFinishedBooks method on myLibrary and specify myBooks as the argument parameter. So on the next line, we're going to call the getFinishedBooks method on myLibrary and specify myBooks as the argument. Now let's check off 15, hit save, and take a look at our output on the right. So if you've completed this project correctly, the output should only print out the books that have a completion status of true. Perfect. Time in and wrote down the funnel are the only two books that we gave a completion status of true. Now to write an additional method that prints out the incomplete books, which are set to false, you would use a similar if statement, except for now you would be checking for false. And lastly, we want to add comments near the top of the program that describe what the library program does. So let's navigate to the top of our program and add some comments describing what library does. A program that checks the completion status of books in a library. Now, of course, your comment can be anything you would like as long as it's descriptive and gives others a good idea of what your program does. Great, now we're done with step 17, and with that, we've come an end to our project. I hope this walkthrough was helpful. I'll see you next time, and happy coding.